Let's continue from verse number 17 onwards. In facing intense opposition, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is told, "Isbir ala ma yaqulun." Be patient over what they say, what the mushrikeen say to you. All of their kalimat of kufr, their mockery, their making fun of the punishment of Allah, their taunting, their demands. Isbir ala ma yaqulun. Be patient over what they say. وَاذْكُرْ عَبَدَنَا دَاوُودَ ذَا الْأَيْدِ. And remember our servant Dawood, the possessor of strength. إِنَّهُ أَوَّابٌ. Indeed, he was one who repeatedly turned back to Allah. So here Dawood alayhi salam is described as Dhal Aid, the possessor of strength. Which kind of strength? Physical strength. He would be able to mold iron. And what other kind of strength did he have? Mental strength. Okay, so he was very firm in terms of his obedience to Allah. A lot of self-control. He would fast very regularly. He would worship Allah for extended periods of time. Right? He had a great amount of control over his sleep as well. Okay? And of course, he also had political strength. We learn about him, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Verily the most beloved fasting to Allah is the fasting of Dawood. And the most beloved prayer to Allah is the prayer of Dawood alayhi salam. He would sleep half of the night, stand in prayer for a third of it, and then sleep for a sixth of it. He would fast every other day." So this is his strength. Not only physical strength, but also mental strength. And here Allah describes him as one who would repeatedly turn back to Allah. إِنَّا سَخَّرْنَا الْجِبَالَ مَعَهُ يُسَبِّحْنَ بِالْعَشِيِّ وَالْإِشْرَاقِ. Indeed, we subjected the mountains to praise with him, exalting Allah in the late afternoon and after the sunrise. وَالطَّيْرَ مَحْشُورَةً. And the birds were assembled, كُلٌّ لَهُ أَوَّابٌ. All with him repeating praise. وَشَدَّدْنَا مُلْكَهُ وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحِكْمَةَ وَفَصْلَ الْخِطَابِ. And we strengthened his kingdom and gave him wisdom and discernment in speech. وَهَلْ أَتَاكَ نَبَأُ الْخَصْمِ. And has there come to you the news of the adversaries? إِذْ تَسَوَّرُوا الْمِحْرَابِ. When they climbed over the wall of his prayer chamber, the prayer chamber of Dawood alayhi salam. إِذْ دَخَلُوا عَلَى دَاوُودَ فَفَزِعَ مِنْهُمْ. When they entered upon Dawood, meaning these adversaries, these disputants, when they entered upon Dawood and he was alarmed by them. قَالُوا. They said, لَا تَخَفْ. Fear not. خَصْمَانِ بَغَى بَعْضُنَا عَلَى بَعْضٍ. We are two adversaries. One of them has wronged the other. فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَنَا بِالْحَقِّ. So judge between us with truth. وَلَا تُشْطِطُ. And do not exceed it. وَهْدِنَا إِلَى سَوَاءِ الصِّرَاطِ. And guide us to the sound path. Meaning the best course of action. And what is the case that was brought to Dawood alayhi salam? One of the disputants said, إِنَّ هَذَا أَخِي لَهُ تِسْعٌ وَتِسْعُونَ نَعْجَةً. Indeed, this my brother has 99 female sheep. وَلِيَ نَعْجَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. And I have one female sheep. فَقَالَ أَكْفِلْنِيهَا وَعَزَّنِي فِي الْخِطَابِ. So he said, meaning the owner of 99 female sheep, he said, entrust her to me, this one sheep that you have, to me. And he overpowered me in speech. قَالَ. He said, meaning Dawood alayhi salam, upon hearing just one side of the story, he said, لَقَدْ ظَلَمَكَ بِسُؤَالِ نَعْجَتِكَ إِلَى نِعَاجِهِ. He, meaning the one with 99 female sheep, has certainly wronged you, the one with one sheep, in demanding your sheep in addition to his own sheep. وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْخُلَطَاءِ لَيَبْغِي بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. And indeed, many associates oppress one another. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds. وَقَلِيلٌ مَّا هُمْ, and few are they. وَظَنَّ دَاوُودُ أَنَّمَا فَتَنَّهُ, and Dawood became certain that we had tried him, we had tested him. فَاسْتَغْفَرَ رَبَّهُ, so upon recognizing his mistake, he asked forgiveness of his Lord. وَخَرَّ رَاكِعًا وَأَنَابَ, and fell down, bowing in prostration, and turned in repentance to Allah. So he was tested through his hukuma, okay, his governance. He was appointed to judge between the people when disputes would arise between them. And so his wazifa, you could say his responsibility, main responsibility, was an amana upon him. It was something that he was entrusted with, and he was supposed to be available to the people so that he would be able to resolve their disputes. So one interpretation of this is that the test that came his way was in a way to remind him that he should be more accessible to the people. He should not be in seclusion away from them, because that would then be going against this wazifa, this responsibility of his. Because if he's not readily available for the people, then how are they going to be able to present their cases to him and find their cases being resolved? Right? He would not be able to judge over them if he's inaccessible for prolonged periods of time. Another reason that's given is that he was tested this way to remind him that he actually, in haste, heard one side of the case that was presented to him and not the other side, and he passed the judgment. And that's not the best way of passing a judgment. And thirdly, his test was to remind him that he actually was in haste. Because not only did he say that the person who was demanding one more sheep, although he already has 99, is in the wrong. He said that, but then he also said, وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْخُلَطَاءِ لَيَبْغِي بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. So this statement is a statement uttered in haste. Okay? And so when he became certain that he had been tested, فَاسْتَغْفَرَ رَبَّهُ, he asked forgiveness of his Lord, and fell down bowing in prostration and turned in repentance to Allah. So here Allah mentions فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ, so we forgave him that, the fitna that he was in. He was not held responsible for it. وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ, and indeed for him, besides maghfirah, is nearness to us and a good place of return, meaning in the hereafter. Now, in this dunya, people will be tested. All people will be tested. They will also have the potential, being human beings, to make mistakes. Okay? Fortunate are the ones who learn from their mistakes. Recognize that they're being tested. This is an important realization. We learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, were you not to sin, لَوْ لَمْ تَكُونُوا تُذْنِبُونَ, were you not to sin, I would fear for you what is even worse. And what is that? Al-ujb, vanity, self-glory, thinking too much of yourself. Because think about it, on a regular daily basis, even if it is that, for the most part of the day, you've been doing everything that is pretty much good, correct, pleasing in the sight of Allah. You've been managing to pray on time, you're reciting the Qur'an, you're also being generous to people, you're not involved in anything very bad. And then what happens towards the later part of the day? Maybe you end up yelling at someone. You break a promise of yours. Maybe you allow for a little bit of backbiting to come into your conversation. And you realize that it's wrong. This prevents you from developing what? Urj. It prevents you from thinking like too highly of yourself. It prevents vanity from entering into your system. It keeps you humble. So in the case of Dawood alayhi salam also, he fell in prostration as an act of repentance, which is an act of humility. And because of this, his rank was actually elevated even more. Now, this performance of sajda tilawa in Surah Saad is not one of the obligatory locations. It's also taken as a prostration of shukr. And there is some evidence for this, as per what is reported by Imam Ahmad from Abdullah ibn Abbas, who said the prostration in Surah Saad is not one of the obligatory prostrations. I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prostrating in this surah. In his tafsir of this ayah, An-Nasa'i also recorded that Abdullah ibn Abbas said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prostrated in Surah Saad, and he said, Dawood prostrated as an act of repentance, and we prostrate as an act of shukr, gratitude. So of course we learn from this the significance associated with promptly seeking forgiveness from Allah for shortcomings, for wrongdoings. We learn that Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, At-tawbah is from the most superior forms of good deeds. And all of the good deeds are based on two conditions. Al-ikhlas, sincerity for Allah, and submission to His commands by following the sunnah of His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says, Al-istighfar, seeking forgiveness, is from the greatest of good deeds. And its door is extensively wide. So whoever has shortcomings in his ibadah, in his speech or actions, or his situation becomes constricted, or his sustenance has decreased, or his heart has become unsettled, then he should turn towards Tawheed and do lots of istighfar. In them there is cure for him, if he is truthful and sincere. Similarly, if a person finds himself falling short in fulfilling the rights of his kith and kin, his wife, his children, his neighbors, and his brothers, then he should supplicate for their forgiveness. So this is an important life lesson. Sometimes you feel, right, that you're not really able to take care of your responsibilities in terms of what you owe to other people. Okay? The rights that other people have upon you. And this can be actually very suffocating, very demotivating also. So if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, seek forgiveness not only for yourself, but also for those others, the people that you owe certain rights to. Seek forgiveness for them. In other words, when you find any kind of strain in any relationship also, the solution is to do what? One of the solutions. Seek forgiveness for yourself and also for the other person. Now, from this incident, we learn a number of lessons. One of them is that coming into someone's private space from a place other than the main door is not very appropriate. It causes fear and it causes concern. So one should not do anything like this. So enter into people's private space from a place that is designated. Don't always be, wanting to surprise people. Okay, you're wanting to enter into someone's room. That room has a main door, but it also has a window. You shouldn't be wanting to enter through the window. Don't go knocking at the window. Knock at the door. Okay? Then also we learn here, busying oneself with what brings public benefit is actually better than busying oneself with what brings only personal benefit. Okay. Also, a person who has been appointed to manage the affairs of people, it's not permissible for that person to just stay away from duty. He's supposed to be available for the benefit of others. He should make himself available. And if he's not available, then he should let it be known, right? He should excuse himself or appoint someone else. Also, we learn here that prophets experienced what normal people experienced: fear, the natural kind of fear. And they also experienced, as we know, sadness. Also, we learn here that if someone becomes afraid of you, when there's actually no need for them to be scared of you, you should tell them that they shouldn't be scared of you. Because these two disputants, what did they do? They actually told Dawood alayhi salam, don't fear. We're not here to harm you. Okay? Also, regardless of what differences and disputes we may have with others, we should not forget and overlook, the common brotherhood and sisterhood that we all share. Because even in this dispute, the one side is presenting the other side, referring to that other side as my brother, akhi. Okay? And also we learn here, Iman and Amalun Salih prevent a person from baghi, from crossing limits. The stronger a person's Iman is, and the more a person is involved in righteous deeds, the more distant that person will be from dhulm and baghi. And very few people have both traits, meaning the trait of having Iman and also performing righteous deeds. Many claim to have Iman, but they don't have righteous deeds. And some have righteous deeds, but they don't really have Iman. Also, we learn here, a judge should not pass judgment except after hearing both sides of a case. Many times people will bring you, as they learn that you're learning the Qur'an and you're learning your deen, they will bring different kinds of cases, like even husband-wife situation. The wife will come and she will present her case to you. And she will say, but what does the Qur'an say about my situation? You haven't heard the other side. Don't give a judgment. Don't pass a judgment. You have very limited knowledge right now, right? We all do. So, especially when it comes to marital relations, never pass judgment based on only hearing one side of the story. And then in general cases also, where two groups are involved, two parties are involved, you need to hear the other side of the story also before passing any kind of judgment or giving any kind of advice even. Also, we learn here the sajda of humility is of the practices of the Anbiya. And also we learn here that mistakes happen. But if a person learns from a mistake and turns towards Allah, draws closer to Him, then this is a means of elevation of rank. So here Allah mentions, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. We said, O Dawood, indeed we have made you a successor upon the earth. And the term Khalifa here means what? Does it mean representative? The one given responsibility by Allah. Okay. Delivering His message. Living by His law. Judging by His law. O Dawood, indeed we have made you a successor upon the earth. فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ. So judge between the people in truth. وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَىٰ. And do not follow your own desire. فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. As it will lead you astray from the way of Allah. Meaning following your desire will lead you astray from the way of Allah. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَضِلُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ. Indeed, those who go astray from the way of Allah will have a severe punishment. بِمَا نَسُوا يَوْمَ الْحِسَابِ. For having forgotten the day of account. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, we learn in verse number 49, وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَاحْذَرْهُمْ. And judge between them by what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their inclinations, and beware of them. lest they tempt you away from some of what Allah has revealed to you. In Surah An-Nisa verse 105 we learn, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ لِتَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِمَا أَرَاكَ اللَّهُ. Indeed, we have revealed to you the book in truth, so that you may judge between the people by that which Allah has shown you. In Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 8 also we learn, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ لِلَّهِ شُهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm for Allah, witnesses in justice, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. اعْدِلُوا, be just. هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, that is nearer to righteousness. In Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 42 we learn, وَإِنْ حَكَمْتَ فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْقِسْطِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. And if you judge between them with justice. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. In Surah Al-Insan verse 24 we learn, فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. So be patient for the decision of your Lord, and do not obey from among them a sinner or ungrateful disbeliever. And also in Surah Al-Kahf verse 28 we learn, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. And keep yourself patient by being with those who call upon their Lord in the morning and the evening, seeking His countenance. And let not your eyes pass beyond them, desiring adornments of the worldly life. And do not obey one whose heart we have made heedless of our remembrance, and who follows his desire, and whose affair is ever in neglect. We learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, judges are of three types. One of whom will go to Jannah, and two will go to Jahannam. The one who will go to Jannah is a man who knows what is right and gives judgment accordingly. But a man who knows what is right and acts tyrannically in his judgment will go to Jahannam. And a man who gives judgment from people, who gives judgment for people, when he is ignorant, will go to Jahannam. Also, we learn from this that it is not correct for a person that when he is given a responsibility, he turns away from it. Because if he runs away from it, and another one, who's going to do the work that needs to be done? So when one is given some responsibility, one should take that responsibility wholeheartedly and then seek Allah's help. And also we learn here, following the desires is a means of straying from the way of Allah. Never should we make this, the main pursuit in our lives, that I'll do what I feel like doing. I'll only do what I feel like doing. Because then when that becomes the mindset, then what has happened here? Your feelings have become your God. You'll only do what your feelings dictate? That's not good. And of the causes of straying from the way of Allah is following the desires and also forgetting about the day of recompense. Okay, let's listen to the recitation of these last few verses.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذ دخلوا على داود ففزع منهم قالوا لا تخف خصمان بغى بعضنا على بعض فاحكم بيننا بالحق ولا تشطط واهدنا إلى سواء الصراط إن هذا أخي له 99 نعجة ولي نعجة واحدة فقال أكفلنيها وعزني في الخطاب قال لقد ظلمك بسؤال نعجتك إلى نعاجه وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْخُلَطَاءِ لَيَبْغِي بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَقَلِيلٌ مَّا هُمْ. وَظَنَّ دَاوُودُ أَنَّمَا فَتَنَّاهُ فَاسْتَغْفَرَ رَبَّهُ وَخَرَّ رَاكِعًا وَأَنَابَ فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِندَنَا لَزُلْفَىٰ وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ. يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض فاحكم بين الناس بالحق ولا تتبع الهوى فيضلك عن سبيل الله إن الذين يضلون عن سبيل الله لهم عذاب شديد بما نسوا يوم الحساب.
Okay, so the reflection question is, how do I plan on remaining connected to the Qur'an for vital reminders from my Creator? Because this surah, it begins with mention of the Qur'an, and it's described as the dhikr, containing reminder. And we all need reminders. So think about this. How are you planning to remain connected to this book? What steps have you taken? You may have formulated an action plan for striving in the way of Allah with utmost effort. Along with making that plan, have you moved on towards the execution phase? Have you made a lot of sincere dua? This month of Ramadan is the month of the Qur'an. So is this a regular feature in your list of supplications in this month, that you ask Allah to enable you to remain connected to His book? And in doing so, meaning in terms of formulating plans and executing those plans, also do shura. Consult with significant people in your life, including your parents, your spouses, right? Your teachers, people who are well-wishing for you, because that adds barakah to whatever it is that you're trying to do. Okay. Action point: seek forgiveness from Allah. Try and read the section of seeking forgiveness from the book وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, and also add this to your list of adhkar. Okay. Try to also note certain life lessons that you learned from the case of the disputants and Dawood alayhi salam. Okay, so take a few seconds to discuss what you've learned from this lesson, and we'll hear some reflections before we move on, inshallah.
shouldn't seek responsibility actually, because it's hard to then do justice to it. But then once you're given it, then you should maybe always
Okay, what did you reflect on? What did you learn from this lesson? Where's the mic? No reflection. You must have discussed something, right? Mm-hmm. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I was thinking about how, like in school, when there's group projects or, like whenever we're given an opportunity to be a leader, I feel like everyone wants to do it because it sounds cool. Like everyone's going to be listening to you, good leadership experience. But if you think about it, it's actually it's a hard position. Like you have to do justice to it. And so like you shouldn't be seeking that, but you should, like if you are put in that position, then you should like make a lot of dua that you don't become arrogant.
Yeah, you should make sure that the intention remains sound. Sincerity is important, and istighfar is also very important. Especially when you start encountering, obstacles. Maybe in a situation like this, like you're describing, you didn't ask for the leadership, but you were given it. Now, your intention is to do your best for the sake of Allah. You start encountering issues, people are like, giving you trouble, or, some problem comes up. So you have a couple of options now. You could either just give up and prove to be not responsible but irresponsible, or you take this as an opportunity to turn towards Allah and humble yourself, acknowledge your shortcomings, your mistakes, learn from this situation, and then continue in the right direction. Ask Allah for help. Also delegate work, take help from other people. And you will notice how, because Allah is most just and He doesn't do any dhulm, He's the most merciful. When situations like this arise in our lives, if we really stop and think and we ask Allah for guidance, we will be able to see our own shortcomings and mistakes of the past through those obstacles. So again, group project, you're the leader. There's this one person in the group who's just giving you a very difficult time, never agreeing to do what needs to be done, for example, right? Now, it's difficult for you to deal with this. You want to, do a good job in terms of being the leader of the group. You want to keep this person on board. You don't want to, spread any negativity in the group. But now what do? So you have to revisit your intention, talk to this person one-on-one. Also, do some introspection. Have you in your life, in some capacity, behaved this way with someone? Maybe not in the same group, but somewhere else, in some other context. Maybe a context that you've completely forgotten. You turn the page when it comes to that aspect of your life. Maybe when you were a little bit younger, maybe it was a family member that you treated this way, and you thought nothing of it. That wasn't a group project. This is a group project. And you will find that if you really start looking at matters in your life this way, you will find that you will recognize your own shortcomings, your own mistakes, a chance for you to seek forgiveness from Allah and from people also. And that's growth. That's a means of elevating your ranks. So here in this case, Dawood alayhi salam was able to see something about himself that needed to be improved. And he recognized it. He wasn't in denial about it. This is humility. And what's one of the main themes of this surah, as was the previous surah as well? Submission before Allah. Humbling yourself. Right? So in this case, when he was startled, this case was presented to him, he ended up giving a certain judgment. And he ended up saying something like, indeed, many khulata oppress one another. he looked at this case that was brought to him in not a very, you know, regular kind of fashion, and he was startled. He ended up giving this judgment, referring to this case as a case of zulm, although he only heard one side of the story. Right? And so it is mentioned, وَظَنَّ دَاوُودُ أَنَّمَا فَتَنَّا. And Dawood became certain that we had tried him. This was a test for him. A believer is able to recognize these kinds of tests. The more, the stronger your iman is, the more you'll be able to see these kinds of situations and see your own flaws, potentials for your growth. And if your iman tends to be a little bit weaker, then you might be like, okay, but why did this happen to me? It shouldn't have happened to me. I don't deserve it. Why did this case have to come to me? What did I do wrong? I was worshiping. These disputants came in the wrong way. They shouldn't have come this way. It's their fault. I'm not in the wrong. That would be an indication of what? Iman that's not really very sound. But when iman is sound, this is what happens. وَظَنَّ دَاوُودُ أَنَّمَا فَتَنَّا. Dawood became certain that we had tried him. And then what did he do? فَاسْتَغْفَرَ رَبَّهُ. He asked forgiveness of his Lord. He passed the test. He adopted humility. Does this remind you of Adam alayhi salam in some ways? Did he make a mistake? After making the mistake, did he recognize that it was a mistake? Then what did he do? He sought forgiveness. His rank was elevated. So if we want elevation of ranks, we need to submit before Allah. We need to identify in our lives areas where it is that we are being tested. And it's really not that difficult. But if we're going to be in haste, if we're going to, allow shaitan to trap us, we're going to, build only negativity and resentment within ourselves, a negative supposition of Allah, then we won't be able to see that we're being tested. Sometimes, we look at a certain person in our life and we say, that person's a test. It's a very negative way of approaching it. Okay, yes, you might be tested through that person. What about you being a test for someone else? That's a reality as well. You are a test for other people, just like other people are a test for you. That person that you're identifying as a test in your life, maybe that person sees you as a test in their life. Or maybe if not that same person, some other person sees you as a big test in their life. So introspect, seek forgiveness from Allah, humble yourself, and where it is that you need to apologize to people, apologize. Okay, what else did you learn? Yes.
I had a question based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, just the entire concept of like not seeking responsibility, and that too being coupled by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm not quoting it, but where it's mentioned that you shouldn't want to be in a position of power. How do we understand that in the light of also like Yusuf alayhi salam, like offering to be the Aziz?
Yeah, because in that context, there was a specific work that needed to be done, which he was actually qualified for doing. And it was for the betterment of, the entire nation at that time, right? He had to offer his services because nobody else was really in that position of being able to handle that situation. So that's him offering his services and presenting his credentials. Okay, that's not, asking for leadership. That's him identifying there's a problem that needs to be solved, and also seeing, yes, Allah has blessed me with the capacity to solve that problem. I need to make my services available. That's an act of well-wishing. Okay, seeking leadership is, like being opportunistic, basically. Seeing that, oh, okay, you know what, if I get that position, then I'm going to become richer or more famous, or people will look up to me. There are other people who are qualified. They can also take on that leadership position. But, if I get it, it's better for me. So there it becomes wrong. Okay? And this is something that we need to be kind of aware of, not only when it comes to political matters or work-related matters, but even when it comes to other matters, family matters. We shouldn't be seeking positions of leadership just for the sake of leadership. Okay? Because in any action that we perform, what's very important is sincerity towards Allah. And that becomes compromised when it is that you're looking at a leadership position only as a leadership position. What attracts you most about that position is not the work that has to be done, the virtue associated with that work, the pressing need of the time, the benefit of people, the welfare of people, right? It's just the leadership. So we need to, in other words, actually look at positions of leadership differently. They're not just, again, as we mentioned earlier also, the end. They're the means to the end. They're not the end itself. Taking on any leadership position is actually a responsibility. It's a blessing, but it's a huge responsibility with a huge accountability. We have to see it as that. And then when you see it as that, then why would you want more and more, greater and greater accountability? Right? But again, if there is a pressing need and you're the one qualified for that, taking care of that need, and then you ignore that, you hide your credentials. You're like, no, I don't want to be in the leadership position, although I know I'm the one who can actually help people right now. Then you might be held accountable for that. Because there was an opportunity Allah arranged for you. He granted you skills, and then you backed out. You might be held accountable for that. You might be questioned, what did you do with the skills that were granted to you? You had this chance, why didn't you help people? Okay, so innamal a'malu bin niyat. Actions are judged on the basis of intentions. Okay, anything else?
Add on to your point, I was watching a video and the scholar said even if someone wants to lead Tarawih, they need to really dig deep inside their heart to ask themselves, like, why do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Is it because I want people to praise my recitation, or do I actually want to help the Jama'ah?
Very important. And think about it, if when any action is begun with sincerity and it concludes with sincerity, then it's a benefit. Right? But if because intentions can change. If an action is begun with sincerity, but then along the way something happens, a person starts enjoying the leadership, doesn't want to part with it, come what may. No, I have this position, nobody can take it from me. If it's going to end with lack of sincerity, then again, innamal a'malu bin niyat, right? Actions are going to be judged on the basis of intentions. So we need to guard our intentions, right? Okay, anything else? Okay, yes, go ahead, Noreen.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
So I had just two quick points. One, just kind of writing on the point that you were making about intentions just now. One of the practices while I was attending Qalam Institute Seminary in Texas was every morning when we started our class, we kind of very mindfully and consciously were made to renew our intention, just with the purpose that, especially when you're learning, acquiring deen, you can kind of develop this sense of self-righteousness that, oh, I'm doing something very good and I'm going to know more than other people in some regard or the other. So I found that practice to be very helpful to kind of mindfully, before you begin and sit down for your class, you kind of acknowledge and you say, I'm going to refresh and renew my attention daily. So that was just something I wanted to share. Secondly, I'm reading about this whole story of Hazrat Dawud alayhi salam. And when you think about the incident that actually occurred, on face value, he seemed to have sided with the underdog, right? So you think that, okay, this person has one sheep and the other one has 19. So to logic, it kind of dictates that he may have made the right decision. But even though he decided what he decided, he immediately sought forgiveness, having realized his mistake and not having seen the other side. And another incident where we saw the same kind of story, or basically a story unfold in the same way, was when Hazrat Musa alayhi salam in Surah Qasas walked upon those two people who were fighting. And he saw the person who was from the oppressed group of people being beaten up by the person who belonged to the the other class of people in the town, and he sided with the underdog as well, and he also immediately repented and sought forgiveness. And that really kind of jars me, that we have to be so cognizant. We have to realize and recognize that how flawed and how insufficient our own faculties are, our own level of perception is, right? So and that, I think, not just when you're tasked with making an active judgment in a case, also applies to us judging people based on things that we see or we might hear, and the suppositions that we might have of people, and in the opinions that we hold of them in our hearts, that we cannot judge things on face value. And it's so important to know what happened on the other side. So that was just a little bit of something I wanted to share.
Very important. And when it comes to leadership, leadership can be of different types, right? Somebody can be in a leadership position politically. Somebody can be in a leadership position even on religious terms because they have knowledge of deen. So in any case, whichever kind of leadership you might be in, right, whichever capacity, even within the home, you have more authority in a home. You might be the elder sibling. You might be the mother, right? You have children under you. With that additional authority or political strength or knowledge comes a lot of responsibility. You can never handle that responsibility without humility before Allah and sincerity towards Him. This is very important. And when we forget this, we make sometimes the biggest mistakes of our lives. But of course, when we do make mistakes, again, what's the next step? Recognize the mistake as a mistake, turn towards Allah and repent. This is what the awwabin do. They frequently return to Allah, seeking His forgiveness, repenting. Okay, let's continue with the next lesson. Lesson number 237, Surah Saad, verses 27 to 29. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا. And we did not create the heaven and the earth and that between them aimlessly. ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. That is the assumption of those who disbelieve from among the people of Makkah and others who are like them. The term خَلَقْنَا from خَلْقَ, which means to create. And then this covers all different meanings of creation. So we've learned about Allah being Fatir, creator. Mubdi', one who brings to existence. And khalq can be used for any of these meanings because it is to create for the first time without a previous pattern or without matter, or to make with matter that already is present. So here in this context, وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا, it means ijad, to bring into existence from complete non-existence. We did not create the heaven and the earth and that between them, all of the makhluq that we know of and also the type that we don't know of. Batila, aimlessly. Batilan from bata'lam. Batil is the opposite of haqqan. Batilan, opposite of haqqan. And also it is said that batil applies to anything that has no reality to it, no truth to it. It has no stability. It cannot last. So, batilan here meaning khalqan batilan, a false creation. Meaning created for a false motive, frivolously. Just for no reason, no benefit. ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. That is the assumption of those who disbelieve. That all of this that has been created is just batil. It's a false creation or it's created for a false motive. In Surah Al-Jathiyah, we learn in verse number 24, وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرُ. And they say, there is not but our worldly life, we die and live, and nothing destroys us except time. And they have of that no knowledge, they are only assuming. وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. So this is not the mindset of a believer. A believer views the heavens and the earth and whatever is between them as being created for a purpose. Because the one who has created all of this is Hakim. None of his work is purposeless. In Surah Al-Hijr, verse 85, we learn, وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. And we have not created the heavens and earth and that between them except in truth, meaning with a purpose. In Surah Ali Imran, verses 190 and 191, we learn, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and the day, are signs for those of understanding. And in verses 190 to 191 of Surah Ali Imran, it is mentioned, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ. The ulil albab are those who remember Allah while standing or sitting or lying on their sides and give thought to the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, Our Lord, you did not create this aimlessly. Exalted are you above such a thing. You are high above creating anything aimlessly. Subhanak. So here Allah mentions, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ. So woe to those who disbelieve from the fire. Now the term wail is used as a proper name of a valley in the hellfire. But also it's used as kalima wa'id, a statement of threat in the meaning of woe. And wailun nakira shows its greatness. A big woe to those who disbelieve from the fire. And min over here can be understood two ways. In the meaning of ta'alil, so meaning because of the fire. Wail for alladina kafaru, because of the fire, which they are going to be immersed in. Or min of bayan, which explains what the wail is. And wail as you know, it's being understood in the meaning of a proper name of a valley in the hellfire. So wail for those who disbelieve. And what is that wail? An-nar, the fire. So the heavens and the earth and everything in between, they've not been created in vain. Rather, every single species is created in a specific way for a specific purpose. And all those creations that have been given an intellect will be told of their deeds on that day, on the day of judgment. And that is why it is specifically said about human beings that Allah did not create human beings in vain. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse 115, we learn, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Then did you think that we created you uselessly and that to us you would not be returned? You wouldn't be brought to account? You wouldn't be asked about what you did? In Surah Al-Dhariyat, we learn in verse number 56, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. So if you look around you, whatever it is that you see, whether that's something large or something small, it has a purpose. So that thing being there and that thing not being there are not the same. So think about it, even something like sneezing, okay? It keeps your body safe. So scientists now, they say that sneezing is an important part of the immune process, okay? It helps you stay healthy. Think about snow. You know, sometimes you wonder, okay, so when is this snow going to finally melt? But actually, snow helps insulate the ground below, holding in heat and preventing moisture from evaporating into the atmosphere. So everything that we see around us, it is there for a purpose, even though apparently it might seem harmful. And everything that has been created, it has a beginning, it has an ending. So in summary, Allah created all things with a purpose, and especially the human being. Allah made arrangements for his guidance, clearly told him what is right, what is wrong, also described the outcome of those who do what is right, those who do what is wrong. And then here Allah mentions, أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَالْمُفْسِدِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Or should we treat those who believe and do righteous deeds like corrupters in the land? So if everything that has been created was created without a purpose, it's just a random assembly of things, then the result will be that all people will then be the same. So Allah questions, أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَالْمُفْسِدِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Or should we treat those who believe and do righteous deeds like corrupters in the land? This istifham is for inkar, for negation, meaning it's impossible. We would never do this. That we would make the ending of those who believe and do righteous deeds the same as the ending of the corruptors? Both of them would just be turned to dust and it's all over? And those who believe, meaning those who affirm what is wajib to be affirmed, with qubul and id'an also. Tasdeeq and qubul and id'an. Affirmation of the truth, declaration of the truth, and also compliance in light of the truth. And those who perform righteous deeds, meaning fulfilling the conditions of sincerity and conformity to the sunnah. So should we treat those who believe and do righteous deeds kal mufsidin, like corrupters, the same as corrupters? Mufsidin, plural of mufsid. And when the term mufsid is used in contrast with those who perform righteous deeds, it means those who are involved in acts of disobedience, evil actions. So mufsid here is a kafir. So kufr is fasad. Kal mufsidina fil ard, like the corrupters in the land, meaning kafirin. So fasad here is used in contrast with iman and righteous deeds. And so it refers to kufr and sayyi'at, disbelief and evil deeds. In Surah Al-A'raf, verse 56, we learn, وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. And cause not corruption upon the earth after its reformation. So we learn from this that kufr and isyan, disbelief and disobedience, are both fasad fil ard. In Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41, we learn, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea by reason of what the hands of people have earned, so he may let them taste part of the consequence of what they have done, that perhaps they will return to righteousness. أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الْمُتَّقِينَ كَالْفُجَّارِ. Or should we treat those who fear Allah like the wicked? Muttaqin, plural of muttaqi. Muttaqi is one who adopts taqwa, takes precaution against the punishment of Allah by carrying out His instructions and refraining from His prohibitions. Should we treat those who fear Allah kal fujjar, like the wicked? Fujjar, plural of fajir, from fa, jim, ra. Fajir is one who is immoral, sinful. And it is said that fujur, wickedness, is from fajara. Fajara means to burst and erupt at a large scale. So fajir is a sinful person who continues to disobey and doesn't repent, is fully engrossed in disobedience to Allah. So here this term fujjar is being used as the opposite of muttaqi, because the muttaqi stays within the limits that Allah has defined, and the fajir is crossing those limits. So what do we learn from this? We learn that Allah created the heavens and the earth for a great purpose and for great hikmah. And thinking that Allah created all of this for no reason is kufr. And because of Allah's justice and His perfect wisdom, He will not make believers who perform righteous deeds equal to mufsidin. Just like the blind and the seeing are not the same. In the same way, those who do good and those who do evil are not the same. In Surah Hud, verse number 24, we learn مثل الفريقين كالأعمى والأصم والبصير والسميع هل يستويان مثلا أفلا تذكرون. The example of the two parties is like the blind and deaf and the seeing and hearing. Are they equal in comparison? Then will you not remember? And also we learn here Iman and Amalun Salih are a means of salah, islah fil ard, a form of or a means of reformation on the earth. Whereas ma'asi, acts of disobedience, are fasad fil ard. And also we learn that the muttaqi and the fajir will have two different destinations. In Surah Ash-Shura, verse 7, we learn fariqun fil jannah wa fariqun fis sa'ir. A party will be in paradise and a party in the blaze. So there are two major categories of people: those who perform righteous deeds with iman, as-salihat, and the second, mufsidin. Their outcomes are completely different. In Surah Al-Jathiyah, verse 21, we learn أَمْ حَسِبَ الَّذِينَ اجْتَرَحُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ أَن نَجْعَلَهُمْ كَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَوَاءً مَحْيَاهُمْ وَمَمَاتُهُمْ سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ. Or do those who commit evils think we will make them like those who believed and have done righteous deeds? Make them equal in their life and their death? Evil is that which they judge. Their lives are so different, so how can their outcome be the same? And many people don't think about this. Why? Because they want to follow only their desires. They just do what they feel like doing. And what did we learn earlier in verse 26? وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Do not follow desire, as it will lead you astray from the way of Allah. So if a person does not live in this dunya with the end in mind, does not understand that we've been created to worship Allah, then in essence, a person is only following his desires. And so he will face severe consequences on the Day of Judgment. And so it is essential that we know our purpose of life. And for a person to know the purpose of life, he needs to turn to a greater, higher being, Allah. And Allah does not speak to people directly, but for people's guidance, He has sent messengers and He has revealed scriptures. And He revealed this book, the Qur'an, upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last messenger. And this is what is mentioned here in the next verse. Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarak. This is a blessed book which we have revealed to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, that they might reflect upon its verses. وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and that those of understanding would be reminded. Kitabun, meaning hada or huwa, this is kitabun, a blessed book. That is mubarak, anzalna, which we have revealed to you. And the term kitab from kaf ta ba, kataba means to write. And here kitab in the meaning of maktub, that which is written. So kitabun, this is a book. And where is it written? Where is it maktub? Number one, in lawh al-mahfuz, fi lawh al-mahfuz, the preserved tablet. Near the angels, bi aydi safara kiramin barara, as is mentioned in Surah Abasa. Or even in the masahif that people have. And also maktub, meaning mafrud. He has made it mandatory upon the people to believe in it and observe it. So kitabun, a book, meaning that which is written where? Number one, in lawh al-mahfuz. Number two, near the angels. And also in the masahif that people have, in the written form, right? And maktub in the meaning of mafrud. It is made mandatory for people to believe in it and observe its teachings. And this book, the Qur'an, has been described as mubarakun, full of barakah, full of blessings. And barakah is al-khayrul kathir al-thabit, al-khayrul wasi'. Abundance of goodness established. Goodness that is vast. In Surah Al-Insan, verse 23, we learn, Inna nahnu nazzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila. Indeed, it is we who have sent down to you the Qur'an progressively. And here Allah mentions, Anzalnahu. We have revealed it. And it is Mubarak because it is a source of khayrul kathir, a lot of goodness, from which one finds expected and unexpected goodness. And also it is kathirul fawaid. It brings benefits of this dunya and the hereafter. And also it is firm, it is thabit, it has continuity. So the sifa of this book that is mentioned here is mubarakun. So how is the Qur'an mubarak? The reward that is received through its recitation is great. So it's a source of great barakah. Reciting one harf brings 10 good deeds, minimum. That's barakah. Then also in terms of the good that a person receives by reciting it, it brings towards a person a special enlightenment, sharh sadr, an understanding, nurul qalb, tama'nina. And if you stick to the Qur'an, more good will come to you than you even ever expected. And it has the power to increase goodness in your life. It also unites the believers upon one common language, the language selected for this book, which is the Arabic language. It's also a shifa, a healing for diseases of the heart and body. And where it is, where it goes, it brings khair. So this term Mubarak actually is used for anything that has a great potential for goodness in it. So when a person connects with this book, which is Mubarak, in a meaningful way, it brings out the best in that person. When a person ponders and reflects upon its meanings. So here it is mentioned, لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, that they might reflect upon its verses. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا from dal ba ra. This was actually يَتَدَبَّرُوا, and the ta has been assimilated with dal. And you see the dal with a shadda. So dubur basically means the back side of something. And tadabbara means to go after something from the behind, right? And adbar, to reflect on the adbar will be the plural of dubur, is to think about the outcome, the ends of matters. The awaqib, the outcomes. And so tadabbur basically is contemplation, careful consideration. It is to look at the Qur'an, to recite it, by way of looking at its application and relevance in one's personal life. So, لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, this lam is of ta'lil. So meaning, we have revealed it down so that people may reflect upon the verses of this book and understand its meanings and look into its application and relevance in their own personal lives. وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and that those of understanding would be reminded. They might be admonished. And tadakkur follows tadabbur, because you cannot take a lesson until you reflect and understand the message. Okay, so لِيَتَذَكَّرَ from dal kafra. Tadakkur is the ability to remember something. Tadakkur, the ability to remember something. So, this is a blessed book which we have revealed to you, that they might reflect upon its verses, meaning this is why we've revealed it, so that people reflect, they ponder, they contemplate, and that those of understanding would be reminded. And the term al-bab from lam ba, plural of lub. And lubb is used for the core of something, the middle part of something, the essence of something. The term labib is used for an intelligent person, a wise person, who gets to the crux of a matter. So ulul albab are those endowed with intelligence, penetrative minds. They're able to understand the crux of the matter. They have aql of rushd, rectitude, a special kind of maturity when it comes to deen. They don't have just aql idrak, perception. In other words, they know what to do with what they've learned, how to put it into action. They don't only know about the text, they know how to apply it. In Surah Al-Baqarah, we learn in verse number 44, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you order righteousness of the people and forget yourselves while you recite the scripture? Then will you not reason? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, meaning you cannot claim to have true, aql rushd. If you're telling people to do good things, then you're not doing good things yourself. Okay? In Surah Al-Jumu'ah, we learn in verse 5, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلُوا التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا. The example of those who were entrusted with the Torah and then did not take it on is like that of a donkey who carries volumes of books. So, there are 3 important steps that need to be taken when it comes to holding on to this book and benefiting from it. Understanding the purpose of life through it. Number 1, qira'ah, recitation, correct recitation of this book. Number 2, tadabbur, for faham, for comprehension. And then taking lessons from it. Allowing it to take an impact on your heart. So when the Qur'an impacts your heart and your limbs, so much so that your thinking, your feelings, your actions all change for the better. And the effect of the Qur'an on the heart is that a person becomes sincere, becomes a loyal, sincere worshipper of Allah, loving Him the most, fearing Him the most. A person turns repeatedly towards Him, has reliance upon Him. And the effect of the Qur'an on the limbs, a person does with the limbs what is required from the limbs. So what do we learn here? There is encouragement being given to live by this book and to benefit from it, to hold on to it, because it is Mubarak. A person can receive no harm from it, but only benefit. In Surah Al-An'am also we learn in verse number 155, وَهَذَا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مُبَارَكٌ فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَاتَّقُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. And this Qur'an is a book we have revealed which is blessed. So follow it and fear Allah that you may receive mercy. And then also encouragement is given here to reflect on the ayat of this book, and that a person should not just do tilawa lafdiyah, because those who only read but don't understand are described as ummiyun. In Surah Al-Baqarah verse 78 we learn وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا أَمَانِهِ وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. And among them are unlettered ones who do not know the scripture except in wishful thinking, but they are only assuming. Such people don't benefit from the book. Then also we learn here, tadabbur upon the Qur'an is an obligation, because acting upon the Qur'an is an obligation. And amal is not possible without tadabbur. In Surah Muhammad, we learn in verse number 24, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Then do they not reflect upon the Qur'an, or are there locks upon their hearts? In Surah An-Nisa, verse 82, we learn, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Then do they not reflect upon the Qur'an? In Surah Al-Mu'minun, we learn in verse 68, أَفَلَمْ يَدَّبَّرُوا الْقَوْلَ. Then have they not reflected over the Qur'an? And then also we learn here, no one takes lessons from the Qur'an except for those who have aql, ulul albab. And so a person cannot be a true Muslim until a person includes this book in his life in a meaningful way. And it's not a matter of only studying it once and then closing it, putting it away. One should make this a continuous connection, meaning the connection with this book. In Surah Abasa, verses 11 to 12, we learn, Kalla innaha tadhkirah, faman sha'a dhakarah. No, indeed, these verses are a reminder, so whoever wills may remember it. In Surah Ibrahim, verse 52, we learn, هَذَا بَلَاغٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَلِيُنذَرُوا بِهِ وَلِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا هُوَ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ وَلِيَذَّكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. This Qur'an is notification for the people, that they may be warned thereby, and that they may know that He is but one God, and that those of understanding will be reminded. So we learn here that to really understand the purpose of life, one must understand the Qur'an for the purpose of reflecting and implementing. Ilm and amal. This book is a reminder that we need because we tend to forget. So such a blessed book has reached us. It has been made accessible for us. So gratitude for this huge blessing requires for us to ensure that we remain connected to this book and also connect others to it. And again, tadabbur is done through recognizing the words and the meanings. And the objective is to be able to do the right amal with this tadabbur. We're looking at the end result of understanding the message, because the message calls for action. That action is, the outcome that needs to be looked at. So tadabbur has to do with looking at that outcome, that result that is to be brought forth. And so we should be then able to resolve daily matters in light of this book. And just knowing the Arabic so well that you no longer need to rely upon a translation is not enough. Many people master the Arabic language, but they don't understand the purpose of life in light of the message of the Qur'an. So think about it. Dawood alayhi salam, we learned about him. He had so many amazing qualities. He was tested in light of the blessings that he was granted. He had so much. He had wisdom, he had kingdom, he had comprehension, yet he was tested. So no matter what stage a person reaches in terms of his abilities, tests will be there in this dunya. He was tested in a matter of just maybe a few minutes, and he reacted, and then he recognized his mistake, and then he did istighfar. So if it is that we, look at this huge blessing that we have, the Qur'an, and then we recognize we have made mistakes, we have fallen short, we have not given the true haqq, we've made mistakes, the way forward is to do what? Seek forgiveness. And also, Dawood alayhi salam's story here reminds us that no matter how much it is that a person has, if they don't have humility, they don't have anything. So the more you recognize your blessings and also some of your shortcomings, the more humble you should become. And with this humility, with the seeking of forgiveness from Allah, ask Him to help you remain connected to this book. Okay, let's listen to the recitation of these verses.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقنا السماء والأرض وما بينهما باطلا ذلك ظن الذين كفروا فويل للذين كفروا من النار أم نجعل الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كالمفسدين في الأرض أم نجعل المتقين كالفجار كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب.
Okay, reflection question. Which deeds that are included in fasad and fujur do I perform? Am I ready to leave those deeds and race ahead in righteous deeds instead? Now, there's an action point associated with what we've learned from this set of verses. The Qur'an is Mubarak. It is full of goodness and blessings. If you were to share this message with the world, what would you say? Because this is a message for the world, that the Qur'an is Mubarak. It's not only a message for the Muslims. Right? So, describe how the Qur'an is Mubarak in your life. So take this as an activity, take this as a project. You will, inshallah, submit this also. Note down your thoughts in the form of a reflection or a gem or an amal story. And in fact, there's a template that has been designed, also shared with you. You can use that template also for this activity, or you can make your own. And try to bring about some creativity in this, compiling your thoughts so that the message is effective. Okay, and this will be submitted with your Juz 23 assignment. Okay, how is the Qur'an Mubarak in your life? Okay, all right. Any thoughts anybody would like to share? Anything you learned? Yes, go ahead, Inza.
I was just thinking about uh, the 3 points you have mentioned with regards to the Quran and how we're supposed to recite it and do tadabbur and then also take lessons from it. How are we to balance the recitation and the tadabbur part? Because I know there's like hadith or just athar of the past as well, where the companions used to take a very long time to get through some of the pages or some of the ayahs because of how much like there was to take from it.
Yeah.
So like even like on a personal level, especially like Ramadan being the month of Quran, sometimes you get torn between recitation and you want to be like, be able to get through a whole bunch of that, but you also want to take it slow and do the tadabbur that we're so clearly, commanded to do within this ayah. So how do you like balance it?
Yeah. So again, this brings us to the point that the Quran is in fact Mubarak because there's so much goodness stemming from every aspect of it, including its recitation, which brings so much reward. So we can never, say that, okay, if somebody is focusing on reciting like a juz every day in the month of Ramadan, that's something that's not bringing goodness. It is bringing goodness, right? But the outcome of that, recitation of that one juz per day is in the hands of Allah. We don't know, where that stands in the sight of Allah. But yes, of course, if the intention is very pure, and if this is something that is done with regularity, with a lot of mindfulness, there is a great reward associated with it. The Quran is Mubarak in that capacity. And then if for someone else, the opportunity that Allah has arranged for them is that they're able to recite that one juz, but they're also able to then reflect upon it, right? They're able to reflect in a communal setting with other people, teaching other people. The Quran is Mubarak. Khairul Kathir, source of ongoing benefit. That person will get the benefit of reciting as well as of reflecting and helping other people reflect as well. Khairul Kathir. It's ongoing. Right? So each aspect of it, the recitation aspect of it, the meanings, meaning the correct understanding of the meanings, and then the application of it also. They're all virtuous. They're all important. Right? And especially when it comes to the implementation part. Right? Sometimes that implementation part is, it has to do with something that is not observed by anyone. Recitation people can observe. If you're reciting somewhere, even in your home, people know that you're reciting it. You're reciting the Quran. Especially when you're in a communal setting, you're reciting in front of people, you're reflecting with them, then people are seeing you. But when it comes to the implementation part of it, yes, sometimes people can see you, implementing what you've just learned from the Quran, for example. But sometimes people have no idea. No one knows that you learned this particular verse today from the Qur'an in a class setting or in your individual recitation, and then you focused on just implementation, purely for the sake of Allah. All of these actions are rewardable. Every single one of them. Just make sure in whichever aspect it is that you are connecting to this book, through recitation or reflection, individual or collective, your intention is very, very pure, very, very sound. You're doing this purely for the sake of Allah, wanting to draw closer to Him. You want to do what is pleasing to Him. And that's very important, because then you will never reach a saturation point. You'll never reach a point where you're like, okay, now this Ramadan, my connection with the book of Allah is perfect. You will never reach that stage, because that stage cannot be reached. It shouldn't be reached. You have to keep trying to advance and do more and do better. Lifelong. So if this Ramadan you're able to do this maybe and that also, you're reflecting and you're reciting also, you're attending Taraweeh also, so you're hearing the recitation as well. Okay, then aim for even better. Because after all, these are all the means to the end, not the end itself. Connecting to the book of Allah is also, a means to the end, not the end itself. So then there is scope for growth. That is how the Qur'an is Mubarak. It brings so much blessing. But we have to, in a sincere way, remain connected to it lifelong. And we have to have that resolve. Right? Okay, anything else? Take this action point seriously, okay? Inshallah. There's a video also related to this that was compiled based off of work put together by students of Taleem al-Qur'an like yourself. Okay, so inshallah, we will play that video for you also to generate some ideas. Okay, inshallah. The work that you put in terms of this particular activity today may be of great benefit to people later on. Maybe through your reflection. You're putting a few words together, a few thoughts together creatively. Someone else might get inspired to embark upon the same journey. That is so transformative. Okay? All right. Now let's continue with the next set of verses. This brings us to lesson number 238, Surah Saad, verses 30 to 40. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa wahabana li Dawuda Sulaiman, and to Dawood we gave Sulaiman. Ni'mal abd, an excellent servant. Innahu awwab, indeed he was one repeatedly turning back to Allah. Wa wahabana, from wahaba. Wahaba yahibu means to gift something to someone, to offer something as a gift, not as a compensation, not as payback. It's to give without strings attached. The term hiba, as you know, is used for a gift. And a child is described as hiba. Wa wahabana li Dawuda Sulaiman. To Dawood we gave Sulaiman, meaning in the capacity of a child. A child is a hiba from Allah because it is fadl from Him. And Allah does not need anything from us in return. We as parents don't have to pay for the child. Nor do we place certain traits in our children. We can make dua, but we cannot place certain traits in our children. We cannot pour certain characteristics into them. In Surah Ash-Shura, verse 49, we learn, Lillahi mulkus samawati wal ard. To Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. Yakhluqu ma yasha, He creates what He wills. Yahabu liman yasha'u inatha. وَيَهَبُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ الذُّكُورِ. He gives to whom He wills female children, and He gives to whom He wills males. So here Allah mentions to Dawood, we gave Sulaiman as a child. Ni'mal abd, an excellent servant, meaning Sulaiman was an excellent abd. Ni'ma is the opposite of bi'sa. Bi'sa is known as fi'l dhanb. It's a blameworthy term that is used for something blameworthy. And ni'ma is fi'l madh. It's a praiseworthy term, used for something that is praiseworthy. Ni'mal abd, an excellent servant. And these verbs, these Af'al are jamid without conjugation tables. So no plural, no past or present, future tense. Okay. Ni'mal abd, an excellent servant. Innahu awwab, indeed, he was one repeatedly turning back to Allah. And this is the ta'leel of the madh, the praise. This is the reason. Why is he ni'mal abd? Because innahu awwab. That's why. He was one repeatedly turning back to Allah. And awwab from Hamza wawba. Awwab means oft returning, ever obedient. Awb means to return. Aba is used for when a living being intentionally, willingly, repeatedly returns to something. In aqwal and harakat. In statements and also movements. So, innahu awwab, indeed, he was one repeatedly turning back to Allah, meaning radja' ilallah. And also ila ta'atihi and tasbihihi. Doing ruju', meaning returning towards Allah. And also turning towards his obedience repeatedly and also praising him, doing tasbih. Always returning to Allah with tasbih and dhikr at all times. And also in the form of tawbah, repentance. So, some lessons we learn from this include the fact that children are a hibah from Allah. Don't resent them, don't avoid them, don't dislike them, don't be overly critical of them. Don't only focus on their flaws. Be grateful for this beautiful gift. And also we learn about the excellence of turning towards Allah regularly with the qalb and actions, with the heart and with actions. Because Sulaiman alayhi salam is praised for this. And then here is an example of how he turned towards Allah. إِذْ عُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ بِالْعَشِيِّ الصَّافِنَاتُ الْجِيَادِ. Mention when there were exhibited before him in the afternoon the poised standing racehorses. إِذْ meaning udhkur, إِذْ mention when this happened. When one evening this happened. What happened? إِذْ عُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ بِالْعَشِيِّ الصَّافِنَاتُ الْجِيَادِ. They were exhibited before him. عُرِضَ from عين را ضاد. عَرَضَ means to become visible. And عُرِضَ is majhul, passive form, which also gives the meaning of enormity as well. So what was displayed was many, many things, made very visible, displayed, presented. And عَرَضَ, when it comes with ala, like it does here, it means to display in front of someone. So many, many horses were exhibited before him. Bil-ashi, in the afternoon. Ashi from Ain Shiniya. Ashi is used for the time which is after midday and before sunset, evening. Here, more specifically, it is referring to the Asr time. Okay, so Ashi, as we've learned before, also is used for the period after midday, late afternoon. Or it's used for the time of Dhuhr until the fall of the night, or even Fajr. So the entire late afternoon and evening. It's been understood both ways. However, here, it refers to the time before sunset, the late part of the afternoon when the Asr prayer is performed. And the term Safinat from Saad Fa Nun, plural of Safina or Safin. Now, this term, Safinat, or the term Safina or Safin, the term Safina, which is the singular, is used for a horse standing on 3 legs with the 4th hind leg supported on the edge of the hoof. And this term is actually derived from Safana Yasfinu, Sufunan, which means to stand on 3 feet with the toe of one hind foot just touching the ground. And this for an animal like the horse is a dalil, an evidence of its strength and energy. Also, it is said that Safinat, the term is used for well-bred noble steeds, thoroughbreds, swift-footed horses. It's said that ordinary horses, not thoroughbreds, don't take on this posture. Which posture? Of standing on 3 legs with the 4th hind leg supported on the edge of the hoof. Okay. And the term safinat is actually feminine only in the word, not in the meaning. It's not referring to female horses. It's referring to prancing steeds, thoroughbreds, which when they stood in a very fancy way. The term jiyad from jim waw dal. Jiyad is the plural of jawad. Jawad means racer, one who exerts and puts in his full effort in a race. Jud means to spend resources generously. And that's why the term or the name Jawad is used for human beings who are generous. Okay. So jiyad are horses of the highest speed. So safinatu and jiyad, right? This description, as-safinatul jiyad, implying that when these swift horses stood, they stood with elegance, with style. And when they ran with might. So the beauty of horses is seen in their appearance and also how they stand and also how they run. So basically they stood with elegance, they ran with speed, exactly what you want in horses. Okay? So when these well-trained, beautiful horses of the highest breeds were shown to Sulaiman alayhi salam in his capacity as a king, he owns these horses. فَقَالَ إِنِّي أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ عَنْ ذِكْرِ رَبِّي. So he said, upon seeing the horses, indeed, I have come to love this good on account of the remembrance of my Lord. أحببت from ha, ba, ba. Hub is love. Now, what does this mean? There are two ways to understand this. Because notice, it isn't mentioned here that إِنِّي أَحْبَبْتُ الْخَيْرِ. أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ. That's what's mentioned. Because when a fi'l comes before the noun, the ism like this, it gives the meaning of ta'akid. So when it is said, for example, أَنَا أُحِبُّ أَنْ أُحِبَّ الْفُلَانِ, it's kind of like saying, I love that I love so-and-so. I love the fact that I love so-and-so. Meaning, I love the idea of being in love with so-and-so. Because here in this sentence, إِنِّي أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ, hub is mentioned twice. Mahabba is mentioned twice. Okay? Or, أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ meaning آثَرْتُ from ithar, which means preference. I have preferred the love of wealth. أحببت meaning آثرت. I have given preference to حب الخير, love of wealth. Now, خير as a term means goodness. It's a general term. The specific meaning of خير is wealth. And here it is referring to the horses. And why is wealth called خير? Because it's not all bad. Wealth is not all bad. It brings خير. It opens the doors for خير also. And especially when it comes to horses. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, الخيل معقود في نواصيها الخير إلى يوم القيامة. Goodness is tied to the forelocks of horses until the day of resurrection. Okay, so here khayr is referring to horses. So he said, Sulaiman alayhi salam said, indeed I have come to love this good. Meaning I really love these horses. Or I have preferred the love of these horses. عن ذكر ربي, on account of the remembrance of my Lord. Now, this needs to be understood. An can be understood two ways here. And an has different usages. One way that an can be understood is in the meaning of due to or because of. For ta'leel or bayan of sabab. Okay? And we find this usage also in Surah At-Tawbah verse 114, where Allah mentions, وَمَا كَانَ اسْتِغْفَارُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ لِأَبِيهِ إِلَّا عَنْ مَوْعِدَةٍ وَعَدَهَا إِيَّاهُ. And the request of forgiveness of Ibrahim for his father was only because of an, due to, or because of a promise he had made to him. But when it became apparent to Ibrahim that his father was an enemy to Allah, he dissociated himself from him. Indeed, was Ibrahim compassionate and patient. Okay, so keeping that meaning in mind of an, the meaning of due to or because of, ta'leel or bayan of sabab. عن ذكر ربي, meaning due to the remembrance of my Rabb. I have liked the love of wealth, not for the sake of personal glory, but for the cause of, because of, for the sake of, so that I can remember Allah and thank Him. The reason for the love of al-khayr here in this case, horses, is because they remind me of Allah. They help me do dhikr. They help me be grateful. So loving something in and of itself is not something bad. Whether that is wealth or people or cars or clothing or a house or a nature walk, whatever it might be. So long as the intention is good. And if a person loves wealth and his intention is to use that in the way of Allah to attain His approval, then earning that wealth with that intention, using it, spending it, is a means of drawing closer to Allah. So Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam were blessed with a lot of wealth. And then we see that some of the Sahaba at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were also rich. But their wealth was a means of elevating their ranks in the sight of Allah. Khadija radiallahu anha was one of the wealthiest of people in Mecca. Where did all her wealth go? In supporting the cause of Islam for the sake of Allah. Now, in most cases, sadly, when a person receives a blessing, that blessing increases him in pride and self-glory, or ujb. This is very detrimental. Whereas if you look at again the Sahaba, look at Abu Bakr. He was the same person during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was the same person when he was made the Khalifa. Him being made the Khalifa didn't change him in a negative way. He had no arrogance whatsoever. So the niyyah again must remain pure, otherwise blessings become spoilt and corrupted. We learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Allah Almighty said, the most beloved act by which my servant worships me is sincerity for my sake. An-nushu li. Also, Dawood alayhi salam, having been given so many blessings, he didn't delay in submitting before Allah and humbling himself. Sulaiman alayhi salam also, when he saw his horses, he didn't have any arrogance whatsoever. So many horses of the best kind were paraded in front of him, yet he has no arrogance. So, when he saw his horses, he immediately said, Inni ahbabtu hubbal khayri an dhikri rabbi. Indeed, I have come to love this good on account of the remembrance of my Lord, not for fame, not for glory, for increase in gratitude. Because remember, it is due to tawfiq granted to us by Allah that we're able to achieve anything good at all. Allah's deen being spread amongst people is a huge blessing. And if it is that we're able to play a small role in this, because again of tawfiq granted to us by Allah, we cannot use this for self-projection at all. And the love for anything, can have two aspects to it. One is satisfaction of the shahwa, and the other is love of maqsad. So whatever takes you towards Allah, whether that is a car, a laptop, a person who connects you to Allah, you end up, building an attachment with that. So what we need to do is we need to improve our thinking about what we're doing and what we're investing in. Ask yourself from time to time, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the objective? What do I want to achieve? So we claim we're doing so many things for the sake of Allah. That's the maqsad. We love doing what we're doing because we love Allah. It's not satisfaction of shahwa. But the real test comes when obstacles appear in our paths and we're shaken up. Do we hold on to what we claim we love the most for the sake of Allah at that time also? Now, another way to understand this is that an over here, inni ahbabtu hubbal khayri an dhikri rabbi. An means away from. Okay, so we learn, for example, in Surah An-Nur, verse 63. فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ. أن تصيبهم فتنة أو يصيبهم عذاب أليم. So let those beware who dissent from the Prophet's order, lest fitna strike them or a painful punishment. So then what would it mean? This statement, I preferred athartu, the love of wealth, admiring these horses that took me away from the remembrance of my Rabb. Dhikr here meaning salah. Which salah? Asr. Salah. So in other words, he's saying, I was checking on these horses one by one, lost track of time, ended up missing the Asr prayer by accident, not deliberately. And he was very upset with this missing of the prayer. But this, keep in mind, this opinion, this interpretation is based on Israeli narrations. So dhikri Rabbi then, according to this interpretation, is the afternoon prayer, the Asr prayer. حتى توارت بالحجاب, until it disappeared into the curtain of darkness. Now, it is referring to what? This can also be understood two ways. So tawarat, first of all, from wawra, yeah. Wara means behind. So ta over here, tawarat, for feminine. So it went or hid, disappeared, went out of sight, meaning the safinatul jiyad. The horses, they went off running until they hid behind a veil, disappeared. Maybe behind some mountain, or they went into the stables. They ran out of sight. And so here, the previous statement, إني أحببت حب الخير عن ذكر ربي, أحببت meaning آثرت, I preferred. I preferred love of wealth, meaning these horses, I kept looking at them until they went off running and went into their stables or hid behind a mountain or just went off into the horizon. Or second way to understand this, حتى توارت بالحجاب, it referring to the sun. It disappeared behind the night's veil until it was concealed by that which veils it from the sight. So the horses were displayed to him in the evening time, ashi, close to sunset. So he was watching them the entire evening. And it is said that Sulaiman alayhi salam had set the evening time for ibadah. But that day, it was spent in watching the horses. And so these horses distracted him from Allah's remembrance. So he said, رُدُّوهَا عَلَيَّ فَطَفِقَ مَسْحًا بِالسُّوقِ وَالْأَعْنَاقِ. Return them to me, and he began to gently stroke their legs and necks. The term rudduha from ra dal dal, rad, that means to return or to put back. So he said urudduha, meaning qala rudduha, ha referring to the horses that were displayed, safinatul jiyad. So he said, return them, the horses, to me from where they disappeared to. It could be the stables behind the mountain, wherever they went. فَطَفِقَ مَسْحًا, and he began to gently stroke بِالسُّوقِ, their legs. Suq, plural of saq, from sin waw qaf. And saq means leg, or the skin or the thigh of a creature. It's even used for the trunk or the stem of a plant. The term a'naq, plural of unuq, from ayn nun qaf. And tafiqa from tafa qaf. Tafiqa means to begin to do something. And these parts are the parts that display the most beauty in a horse in particular. The legs and the necks. And the term mash from mim sin ha, masaha means to wipe or stroke with the hand. Now, this has also been understood two ways. One way is that what this means, فَطَفِقَ مَسْحًا بِالسُّوقِ وَالْأَعْنَاقِ. This means he began striking off their necks and their legs with a sword in order to slaughter them. So meaning شرع يمسح صيف بسوقها وأعناقها. He began striking off their necks and calves, their legs, with a sword in order to slaughter them. Imam Raghib, he says, masha bisayf is synonymous for darb, slashing with the sword. because he was upset that they had caused him to miss the salah, so he slaughtered the horses. And it's understood that he must have cut the tendons before the rest of the animal was cut, because a horse is a huge animal. It's possible he gave the meat in charity in order to attain Allah's closeness. So he basically gave these horses up for the sake of Allah. That's what happened. Now again, this is something that is based off of Israeli narrations. That he was so busy reviewing his horses, watching them, he forgot to offer the evening or ibadah. And so when the sun went down, he commanded that the horses be brought back, and when they came back, he started slashing them, slaughtering them, sacrificing them in the way of Allah. Again, we don't find any solid evidence for this from the Qur'an nor from the Sunnah. Okay. The other way this has been understood is that what is referred to as masham bis-suqi wal-a'naq means exactly that. He was gently stroking the horses out of love. He began stroking them. Ibn Abbas, he says, he began patting the horses on their heads and legs out of love for them. And in fact, we learn that Ibn Jarir, he says that it's not possible that he would kill animals without a reason and would destroy his own wealth like this. That does not befit a prophet. So when his well-bred horses were presented before him, he said, I love this wealth not for the sake of personal glory, but due to the remembrance of my Rabb. And because these horses were as-safinatul jiyad, they went far away, disappeared from his sight, he ordered they be brought back, and then he started gently stroking them out of love. Now, this meaning actually flows much better. Okay? It also tells us about the character of the believers in terms of their dealings with not just people, but also animals. They're gentle. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا سُلَيْمَانَ, and we certainly tried Sulaiman. وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ جَسَدًا, and placed on his throne a body. ثُمَّ أَنَابَ, then he returned. We certainly tried Sulaiman. How? Through some kind of an illness, marad, or taking his mulk away from him for a short while, because each person is tested in this world in a different way. Messengers are also tested to elevate their ranks more than before. And in every test, if a person is successful, then he moves ahead. And if he's not successful, then he has an opportunity to learn a lot and improve the next time. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا سُلَيْمَانَ, and we certainly tried Sulaiman. وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ جَسَدًا, and placed on his throne a body. Now here, kursi referring to his sarir, his sitting place when he would govern people, or his position of being king. The term jasadan from Jim Sin Dal. Jasad is used for a body of a living being, but without blood flowing through it. It's also used for a very weak body, which is almost lifeless. Now, whose body is this? Which jasad is this? The Qur'an does not mention the details. Scholars have mentioned different opinions, but these are not based off of any authentic evidence from the Sunnah. So one view is that this is referring to a son of Sulaiman alayhi salam, because he made a vow that he would have multiple children through his multiple wives, and each one of them would be mujahideen fi sabilillah. Okay, so only one wife bore a child, and that child was barely a human. Okay, we learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Sulaiman, he said, tonight I will sleep with, according to some versions, 90 or 100 of his wives, each of whom will conceive a child who will be a mujahid. So his companion said, if Allah wills. But Sulaiman alayhi salam did not say so. Therefore, none of the women got pregnant except for one who gave birth to a half child. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, if Sulaiman had said, Insha'Allah, he would have begotten children who would have fought in Allah's cause. So it is said this one child was brought to him while he was on his kursi, who was basically just a jasad. And so Sulaiman alayhi salam turned towards Allah. Another view is that a devil, jasad, began running his kingdom, took over his position, sat on the throne, managing the affairs of the kingdom. And Sulaiman alayhi salam for some time couldn't do anything about this. Now this is also an opinion, but keep in mind that devils cannot successfully tamper with the missions of the Anbiya. Okay, so this view is that there was some kind of a devilish, bossy figure that took over this kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salam for some time. Another view is that Sulaiman alayhi salam himself was on the throne, but just as a jasad. He became very, very sick because of some marad. And so he wasn't able to make the kinds of judgments he was able to make otherwise. His tafkir had been taken away from him temporarily. Because think about it, when a king is appointed as a king, but he's really just like a puppet, he doesn't really have much authority. He's just a figurehead. He's like a jasad, right? So the stronger opinion here seems to be that for some reason, Sulaiman alayhi salam was unable to do anything by way of governing his kingdom for some time and was kind of stuck in that state. And then he turned to Allah in repentance. ثُمَّ أَنَابَ. He turned towards Allah with sincerity, with a sincere heart. He did tawbah. Or this can even mean ثُمَّ أَنَابَ, then he returned, meaning returned to his mulk. After having been away while the jasad was on his kursi, he regained his senses, in other words. رَجَعَ عَلَى صِحَّتِهِ. He regained his sihha, his well-being, his good health. قَالَ رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي. He said, my Lord, forgive me. وَهَبْ لِي مُلْكًا لَا يَنْبَغِي لِأَحَدٍ مِّن بَعْدِي. And grant me a kingdom such as will not belong to anyone after me. So he did istighfar for whatever mistake it is that he made, which perhaps could have taken away his tafkir and tadbir. Now, when a prophet seeks forgiveness, it does not mean that he did something blatantly wrong. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would seek forgiveness more than 70 times a day. So why is there so much emphasis placed upon seeking forgiveness with so much regularity? Because if there's anything that has become somewhat of a barrier between us and Allah, that should be removed. So he said, my Lord, forgive me. وَهَبْ لِي مُلْكًا. And grant me a kingdom. Haba is fi'l amr. Now also we learn here seeking forgiveness before asking is important, because sins become a barrier between us and what we desire, what we want, our maqsood. So he says, grant me a kingdom, لا ينبغي لأحد من بعدي, such as will not belong to anyone after me, other than me, until the day of judgment. So he was a king and a prophet, but the wind and the jinn, etc. were subjected for him. The term ينبغي from ba'ghaynya. Imbagha means permissible or appropriate. So it would not be appropriate for anyone else ba'adi besides me to be granted what I have. Grant me a kingdom that I am the only one worthy of, ever. I want the best legacy, in other words. And a kingdom that does not ever get eclipsed, doesn't expire, doesn't fade. And he asked for this position. He didn't say, don't give it to anyone else besides me. This interpretation wouldn't be really very correct. He's asking for the best legacy which is deserved, not usurped. And also, another view is that what this means is that don't take this kingdom from me ever again. Don't give it to anyone after me. Like how it was taken away from me momentarily. Don't let this happen again. Innaka antal wahhab, indeed you are the bestower, the one who gives a lot of hibah. So Sulaiman alayhi salam's dua was accepted and he was granted a kingdom, the likes of which were not given to anyone after him. The jinn were subservient to him, the birds were subservient to him. He was given control over the wind also. It was said that the mountains were subjected for him. Think about it, control over these three things, jinn, birds, and wind, was only given to him. And after him, no one else was given this control. Now notice again, his dua begins with istighfar. And he's convinced also that Allah is Al-Wahhab. He has a good supposition of Allah. We learned earlier, Dawood alayhi salam was tested and he immediately turned to Allah and then Allah made him a Khalifa. Sulaiman alayhi salam was tested and he immediately turned to Allah and made dua. Allah responded to him and gave him a kingdom that remains unmatched, unparalleled. So if a person wants his supplications to be accepted, it's necessary that that person becomes obedient to Allah and turns to Him. ثم أناب. فَسَخَّرْنَا لَهُ الرِّيحَ تَجْرِي بِأَمْرِهِ رُخَاءً حَيْثُ أَصَابَ. So we subjected to him, only him, the wind blowing by his command, subject to his order, gently wherever he directed. Ruha from ra, ha, wow, from the term rakhawa, which means gentleness. Rakhiya yarkha means to be soft or relaxed. And the term asab from swad wawba, literally asaba means to reach. And notice the word rih in the Qur'an refers to strong winds that bring destruction. And riyah, plural, used for winds that bring goodness. So the rih would blow by his command as ruha. It would be gentle and soft. In Surah Al-Anbiya, we learn in verse 81, وَلِسُلَيْمَانَ الرِّيحَ عَاصِفَةً. And to Sulaiman we subjected the wind blowing forcefully, proceeding by his command toward the land which we had blessed. So it would be a gentle wind when he rode upon it, but it had pressure such that they could travel by air at great speeds. If you think about it, when you're inside a plane, the air within the plane is what? Ruha, gentle. But outside, very powerful, very strong. وَالشَّيَاطِينَ, and also the devils of jinn, كُلَّ بَنَّاءٍ وَغَوَّاصٍ, every builder and diver. And here, ash-shayateen referring to jinn. Banna'in from ba nun waw or ba nun ya. Bunyan is from the same root letters, which means structure. So banna meaning every builder who would build high, lofty structures, basins and reservoirs, cauldrons also, fixed in their places. وَغَوَّاص, and diver. غَوَّاص from غَيْن waw صاد. غَوَّاص is one who dives a lot. غَاصَ يَغُوصُ, غَوْص, it means to dive in order to bring something out. The term غائص actually is used for someone who reflects very deeply and derives gems. Okay. So غواص here meaning diving into the sea, bringing up pearls and other precious jewels, and also inventors who made new inventions. And so he built Masjid al-Aqsa, Sulaiman alayhi salam did, which had been built by Yaqub alayhi salam. He also built other structures, some remnants of which still stand today. In Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 82, we learn, وَمِنَ الشَّيَاطِينَ مَنْ يَغُوصُونَ لَهُ. And of the devils were those who dived for him and did work other than that. وَيَعْمَلُونَ عَمَلًا دُونَ ذَلِكَ. And we were of them a guardian, meaning Allah was controlling them. وَآخَرِينَ مُقَرَّنِينَ فِي الْأَصْفَادِ. And others bound together in shackles. From among them, those who were disobedient and rebellious. The term مُقَرَّنِين from قاف را نون, qarn means to join. And the term asfad, plural of safad. Safad is used for an iron collar or chain. Others bound together in shackles, fettered, meaning completely under his control and order, not able to escape or create any mischief. هذا عطاؤنا فامنن أو أمسك بغير حساب. We said, meaning قلنا لسليمان, we said, this is our gift, so show favor or withhold without account. Ata is a gift given as a favor, an extra favor. A favor done on someone as compensation for their work. This is our gift, so show favor, grant, bestow, give whatever you wish to whomever you wish, or set free whomever you wish, be good to whoever you wish, give a wage to whoever you wish, or amsik or withhold from giving, keep caged, keep fettered, whoever you wish, بغير حساب, without account. وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى, and indeed for him is nearness to us, meaning a station of nearness, a higher rank, a rutbah. وَحُسْنَ مَآب, and a good place of return. Ma'ab from Hamza wa Uba. Ma'ab is ism zarf, a place of return, a fair resort. So again, what do we learn here? Allah tests his chosen beloved slaves, prophets as well, in order to elevate their ranks. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked which people have the greatest afflictions. He replied, the prophets, and then the most righteous, and then the most righteous. Also, we learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, an ifrit from the jinn came to me yesterday suddenly, so as to spoil my prayer. But Allah enabled me to overpower him, and so I caught him and intended to tie him to one of the pillars of the masjid so that all of you might see him. But I remembered the invocation of my brother Sulaiman. رَبِّ هَبْ لِي مُلْكًا لَا يَنْبَغِي لِأَحَدٍ مِّن بَعْدِي, and so I let him go. Because only Sulaiman alayhi salam was given this amount of control over the jinn. Okay, so inshallah we will end here for now. When we resume tomorrow, inshallah, we will go back to some of these last few verses of this lesson before we continue further. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.